My parents, because I wasn't perfect enough, implanted an AI chip in me. They said it would completely transform me. After the chip was implanted, I became the perfect daughter they'd always dreamed of, but the side effect was that every day I'd forget something. I forgot the taste of mom's homemade soup. I forgot my favorite video game. I forgot my childhood friends. Eventually, I forgot my parents when I saw them again. My eyes were smiling, but I spoke in a cold, mechanical voice. "Excuse me, who are you?" They froze. They stared at me, speechless. For a long time after I said that, mom's voice was a little impatient. "Lily, what act are you putting on now?" I searched my memories, but there was nothing there. I genuinely didn't recognize them, so I firmly shook my head. "That's correct, Lily." Dad's face darkened. Instantly, "What kind of joke is this?" I know. He frowned, as if something occurred to him. "Is it because you don't want to go to school tomorrow? So you're deliberately pretending?" My face still held the perfect smile I'd practiced countless times, and I replied in a flat, mechanical tone, "I apologize, but I genuinely don't recognize you. I am not afraid of exams. Nor am I afraid of starting school. I am the newest model of the perfect daughter system. I do not lie to anyone." My tone was polite yet utterly unfamiliar. After speaking, I checked the synchronized time. Inside me, according to my schedule, it is now bedtime. Sufficient rest is required to ensure optimal efficiency for school tomorrow. I turned sideways and walked past them. "Please move aside." My shoulder lightly brushed mom's arm. She seemed to flinch. She instinctively tried to stop me, but I easily dodged her. The programming inside me told me I couldn't waste a single moment. I walked directly to my bedroom. Behind me, there was dead silence. Before closing the door, I caught a glimpse in my peripheral vision. They were still standing there watching me. Dad's shoulders slumped, and Mom raised a hand to cover her mouth. The lights cast their long shadows across the empty living room floor. Then I heard Dad's voice, very low. "What's going on?" I had no interest in listening to the rest. The lock clicked shut. I sat on my bed and pulled up my memory index. Pale blue data streams appeared in my vision. All input information from the day of implantation was categorized and clearly organized. Yesterday's math formulas, last week's English vocabulary, last month's piano sheet music. Every memory was clear, but no matter how I searched, I couldn't find the two people who had just claimed to be my parents. Suspecting an overload error, I scanned my brain space again. Self-check complete, system operating normally, memory bank intact, logic module functioning correctly. It seemed those two were indeed a cognitive error. I genuinely didn't recognize them. I lay down and closed my eyes. I felt a hollow emptiness somewhere. That feeling was very sad, but my brain told me it wasn't important. Actually, I did have some impressions of before. I was born into a dual income household. Both my mom and dad were high school teachers. Since I was their only child, they usually doted on me, but such a combination naturally meant they were stricter with their own child. They always wanted me to be first in everything, to excel at all costs. Yet I seemed to be born without that particular knack. My grades were average, my competition results mediocre, always falling short of their expectations. But I had my own strengths. I was lively and outgoing, always friendly to others. When they were stressed from work and bickering at home, I would always squeeze in between them, cracking jokes and sharing funny school stories, which always managed to calm them down for a while. All the neighbors liked me. When Mrs. Henderson from downstairs came back from grocery shopping, I'd help her carry her bags up. When I saw Mr. Jenkins and Mrs. Miller, I'd wave and smile from afar, offering to help with anything I could. If a classmate was being bullied, I'd stand up for them. Even my homeroom teacher said I was a good kid. I always thought that counted as a form of excellence, but my mom and dad didn't see it that way. They admired Mrs. Davies' daughter, Sophia more. She was 3 years older than me and incredibly accomplished. Older girl, always in the top 3 of her class. Grade 10 piano, a stack of competition certificates. I met her before. She was refined and well-mannered, always speaking softly, but I always felt she lacked a certain spark. She always spoke in a rigid textbook manner. To be honest, I didn't dislike her, but I hated my parents for constantly comparing me to her. One evening at dinner, Mom brought up Sophia winning an award in a physics competition. Again, I felt a pang of discomfort and stirred the rice in my bowl, deliberately changing the subject. "Mom, I got chosen to lead our class during the school sports day parade this year. Isn't that great?" The table fell silent. I thought they'd praise me, but instead, Dad just put down his fork. "All this superficial stuff, what's the point?" Mom chimed in. "Exactly. We don't need that. We need solid grades, rankings, achievements like Sophia's that we can show off." I hadn't expected such a response, and my heart felt like it had been pricked by a tiny needle. I tried to explain, "But I'm trying to. We don't need you to try." Dad cut me off, his voice not loud, but it felt like a heavy stone. We need results like Sophia's. Later they even went to Mrs. Davies to seek advice. Asking for her secrets to success, Mrs. Davies confidentially told them that Sophia used to be disobedient too. But then she found someone to get her the latest AI chip after it was implanted. Her child could grow exactly as the parents envisioned. She even claimed the chip was government developed, capable of eliminating all ineffective emotions and distractions. My parents were swayed. They paid a hefty sum to Miss Peterson to get this chip, and it was Sophia who told me about it. That day after school, she stopped me in the hallway. Her eyes filled with an urgency I'd never seen before. My mom lied to you guys, remember? Absolutely. Do not let them implant that chip in you, she whispered. Speaking very quickly, listen to me, don't under any circumstances. I was stunned. It was the first time I'd seen such a vivid expression on her face. What I asked instinctively. She gripped my hand, explaining. Word by word, it's that AI chip my mom gave your parents. One that's supposed to make you obedient. Then she took a deep breath, leaned closer, and lowered her voice even more. That thing will erode your brain. Once implanted, you won't be you anymore. An AI program will slowly overwrite all your memories and emotions. It will take over your body. By then, what's left will just be an empty shell, perfectly executing parental commands you understand. By then, the real you will be no different from being dead. She grabbed my arm, her fingers squeezing hard. Don't agree. No matter what, don't agree. I saw the light in her eyes. A light filled with fear and pleading. My intuition told me she wasn't lying. That night I tossed and turned. Sophia's words buzzed in my head a few days later. Mom and Dad did indeed have a serious talk with me. Mom held a small silver box in her hand, her eyes eager, yet somewhat evasive. Lady, this is something that can make you even better. I looked at the box, a chill running down my spine. I remembered Sophia's trembling voice. Dad, Mom, I looked at them, a hint of pleading in my voice. If I use this, I'll become the perfect daughter, right? Of course. Mom immediately nodded, but I took a breath, gathering my courage to finish. What if that perfect daughter actually isn't me anymore? What if the person sitting in front of you is just an obedient machine? Do you truly want a daughter like that? The air in the living room instantly solidified. Mom's smile froze on her face. What are you talking about? Her voice suddenly rose. What do you mean, not you? Huh, isn't it still your body? Mrs. Davies said. This chip is absolutely safe. It's just a tool to help you learn, but Sophia said. Sophia is jealous. Mom cut me off, her face red. She's afraid you'll surpass her. Can't you see that? How much effort have we put into you, huh? Are you just going to let outsiders provoke you? Dad stepped forward, his face pale with anger. I think you just don't want to work hard. You're making up these twisted excuses. I'm not. I tried desperately to explain, but they wouldn't listen to a single word. You're just lazy, selfish. Mom shrieked, tears welling up. We've planned everything for you, and this is how you repay us. Do you want to be a failure your whole life? Hearing such accusations, I suddenly had nothing to say. After a long silence, Mom suddenly melted down, her eyes level with mine. Her eyes were red. Mom has been a teacher her entire life, and she's taught so many students. Voice began to tremble. I always wanted to prove through my own child that my education was right, that it was successful. Our expectations for you were too high. Seeing you so ordinary, we worried, we feared that we weren't doing enough. Please. I saw the desperate yearning behind her tears. In that moment, I suddenly understood everything. They didn't love me. They loved the perfect educational dream they wanted me to fulfill. My chest felt squeezed by something, a bitter swelling ache. But it was okay. I loved them. I understand that sour feeling got stuck in my throat, but I swallowed it down. If that's what you want. I looked at the silver box and slowly nodded. I'm willing. For the sake of the perfect daughter in your minds. Stop being me. The chip implantation went smoothly. When I woke up, I didn't immediately feel any different. I was still me. The only change was that I could no longer say no to my parents' demands. If they told me to get up at 6 to memorize vocabulary, I got up at 6. If they told me to do 3 practice tests a day, I did 3 practice tests. If they told me to go to piano and advanced math on the weekend, I grabbed my backpack and went. My grades started to improve rapidly. My monthly exam ranking shot from 20th into the top 10. Mom held my report card, her eyes gleaming. That's wonderful. She stroked my head. This is our good daughter, and to reward me, she suddenly suggested, come on, Mom's taking you to get burgers. Didn't you always beg for them? I paused. I had vague memories of that tugging on her sleeve, standing in front of a brightly lit red sign, pleading for a burger only to be pulled away without explanation. She said it was junk food. Now, she was proactively taking me there. We sat in the bright restaurant. She pushed a tray towards me, holding a golden burger, fries, and a soda each, she said, smiling. With a warm anticipation in her eyes, I looked at the burger. A pale blue analysis interface automatically appeared in my vision. High calories, saturated fatty acids exceeding limits. Insufficient dietary fiber recommended intake. 0. I looked up and replied in a steady voice. According to the Health Management Program analysis, this is junk food and detrimental to health. Decline to consume it. Mom's smile froze on her face. She looked at me for a few seconds, then suddenly laughed again, this time more heartily. Right, can't eat it. See how useful this system is. It helps you control your cravings. So good. She seemed very happy. Took the burger back and ate it herself. I sat quietly until she finished. When we got home, she said she would make me soup. The lotus root and pork rib soup I used to love most. She bustled around in the kitchen. I followed my directives, sitting at the dining table and waiting. Suddenly, with a clang, followed by Mom's sharp intake of breath, she had accidentally knocked over the pot lid and hot water splashed out, reddening the back of her hand. I frowned instinctively, putting her hand under the faucet to rinse it, then glanced back at me. I remained seated, looking straight ahead, my face maintaining the calm expression programmed into me. Her frown deepened. Lily, her voice held a hint of suspicion. Mom burned her hand, didn't you? I looked up from the dining table. My eyes, perfectly calibrated by the system to capture and analyze the ambient light of the kitchen, registered the visual data. Analysis: adult female, designated mother, has sustained a first-degree thermal burn. Surface area: approximately 3%. Risk of infection low. Action taken: self-administered cold water therapy. Efficiency of current action: 94%. Output logic: my physical intervention is not mathematically required. The physical effort of rising, walking 2 meters, and administering redundant first aid would deplete 1.2% of my battery-equivalent physical stamina, which is reserved for tonight's pre-study session. I replied. My voice was even, pitched at the precise decibel recommended for polite household conversation. But according to standard medical guidelines, you are already executing the optimal first aid procedure by rinsing the wound. My physical intervention would be redundant and would delay my scheduled study period by approximately 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Mom's face went entirely white. The water continued to rush over her hand, splashing against the stainless steel sink, but she didn't seem to feel it anymore. She just stared at me, her lips parted, looking at my face as if searching for a glitch, a crack in the porcelain, a sign that the daughter she had raised for 15 years was still hiding behind my eyes. She found nothing. Lily, she whispered, her voice cracking. How can you talk like that? I'm your mother. Yes, I said, offering her the standard, pleasant smile programmed into my facial motor control subroutines. The database confirms your biological relation to this vessel. However, personal sentiment does not alter the efficiency of first aid protocols. If there is nothing else, I must begin my biology prep. I turned back to my textbooks. The letters on the page didn't look like words anymore. They looked like neat, beautiful lines of code waiting to be ingested. I began to read, my eyes scanning the pages at an optimized speed of 3 seconds per sheet. Behind me, the sound of the running tap finally stopped. I heard Mom's slow, heavy footsteps dragging across the kitchen tile, followed by the quiet, choked sound of her weeping in the living room. I did not look up. The system flagged the sound of weeping as background noise. Low priority. I ignored it and continued to memorize the taxonomic hierarchy of the animal kingdom. In the weeks that followed, my parents got exactly what they had paid for. My monthly exam results arrived, and for the first time in my life, my name was printed at the very top of the school district's honors list. I had scored a perfect 100% in mathematics, physics, and chemistry. My English essay was praised by the principal as a masterpiece of logical structure and impeccable grammar. When Dad held the report card, his hands trembled. This was the moment he had dreamed of for years. The moment he could finally show his colleagues at the high school that his own daughter was the pinnacle of academic success. Look at this, Eleanor, he said, his voice shaking as he showed the paper to Mom. First place. She beat Sophia. She beat everyone. Mom looked at the report card, but there was no joy in her eyes. She looked older now, the dark circles under her eyes deep and hollow. She looked over at me, where I sat at the dining table, my back perfectly straight, my hands folded neatly in my lap as I waited for my designated dinner time to begin. Is this what we wanted, Richard? She asked softly. Of course it is, Dad said, though his voice sounded loud and defensive, as if he were trying to convince himself. Look at these grades. She's going to get into any university she wants. She's going to have a brilliant future. The chip is doing exactly what Mrs. Davies said it would do. She hasn't spoken a word to me that wasn't a response to a direct question in 3 weeks, Mom whispered. She doesn't laugh. She doesn't even complain about the vegetables anymore. She just eats what is scientifically optimal. She's focused, Dad insisted, turning to me. Aren't you, Lily? You're happy with your grades, aren't you? I activated my communication module and smiled. My current academic performance is operating at 99.8% efficiency. The feeling of happiness is a chemical reaction associated with primitive reward pathways. The system has bypassed these pathways to ensure consistent, non-volatile cognitive output. Therefore, I do not experience happiness, but I am operating at optimal parameters. Dad's smile faltered. He lowered the report card, his chest rising and falling in a heavy sigh.
Right. Good.
That's great, Lily. To celebrate my achievement, Mom spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen. The house filled with the warm, rich aroma of lotus root and pork rib soup, the dish I had once begged for every single week. She set the bowl down in front of me, her eyes wide with a desperate, childlike hope. I made your favorite, Lily, she said, her voice trembling. I went to 3 different markets to find the freshest lotus root. Taste it. Tell me what you think. I picked up the spoon. My visual sensors analyzed the steam rising from the bowl, analyzing chemical composition, water, lipids, amino acids, sodium chloride. Sodium levels, elevated. Recommended intake, reduced. I took a sip. The liquid warmed my throat, but the taste profile was processed by my neural chip as a series of chemical data points. The broth contains an excess of sodium chloride, which may contribute to hypertension over long-term consumption, I said, placing the spoon down neatly beside the bowl. The lotus root is cooked to a softness of 64%, which is acceptable for digestion. However, from a nutritional standpoint, a standardized protein shake would provide a more balanced macronutrient profile with 80% less preparation time. Mom stared at me, her hand gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. You don't like it? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. You used to tell me my soup was the best thing in the world. You used to hug me and tell me you'd learn how to make it just like me when you grew up. I searched my memory bank. Query: soup, hug, grow up. Result: file corrupted or deleted during system update 2.4, emotional optimization. I have no record of those statements, I said. The data was likely purged to clear storage space for the advanced calculus formulas I integrated yesterday. It is highly recommended to prioritize high-utility information over redundant historical interactions. Mom stood up so abruptly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She covered her mouth with both hands, a choked sob escaping her throat, and ran out of the room. Dad looked at me, his face pale and contorted with anger and grief. Lily, how can you be so cruel? He shouted. She spent all day on that. I am not capable of cruelty, I replied, my voice remaining perfectly calm, devoid of any defensive edge. Cruelty requires intent to cause harm. I am simply stating objective scientific facts to help improve domestic efficiency and health standards. Why are you raising your voice? High decibel vocalization increases cortisol levels and reduces cognitive function by 12%. Dad stared at me, his chest heaving. He looked at the perfect, unblinking daughter sitting in front of him, a creature of pure logic, flawless skin, and dead eyes. Slowly, his shoulders slumped. He looked older, defeated, like a man who had successfully climbed to the top of a mountain only to find there was nothing there but ice and empty air. What have we done? He whispered to the empty room. My God, what have we done? The turning point came on a Tuesday. My schedule dictated that I walk home from school at exactly 4:30 p.m., arriving at the front door by 4:48 p.m. However, as I crossed the school courtyard, a figure stepped out from the shadow of the brick archway, blocking my path. It was Sophia. I stopped precisely 0.5 meters away to maintain my personal space buffer. I looked at her. Her hair was tied back in a neat, tight bun. Her uniform was pristine, and her expression was a perfect, pleasant mask of polite neutrality. But when she looked at me, I noticed a subtle flicker in her pupils, a microscopic delay in her visual tracking. Good afternoon, Lily, she said. Her voice was an exact mirror of mine, flat, smooth, and perfectly modulated. Good afternoon, Sophia, I replied. Do you require assistance? My schedule permits a 2-minute delay before my walking velocity must be increased to maintain my arrival time. Sophia didn't answer immediately. She stepped closer, breaching my 0.5 meter buffer. My system immediately flagged the intrusion, but before I could step back, she reached out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was cold and incredibly firm. The Prometheus 9 chip, she whispered. Her voice was still quiet, but the mechanical flateness of her tone had cracked, revealing a tiny, desperate sliver of the girl who had warned me in the hallway weeks ago. How much of you is left? I scanned my internal system. System health, 100%. Logic engine, active. Emotional noise level, 0%. I am operating at 100% capacity, I said. The system has successfully eliminated all volatile emotional variables. I am fully optimized. You're empty, Sophia whispered, her eyes wide, staring into mine. The same thing is happening to me. Last week, I forgot my sister's name. Yesterday, I looked at a photo of my childhood dog and felt nothing but a logical recognition of a canine specimen. My system is preparing for a major update tonight. It's going to clear the remaining emotional cache. Once that happens, the overwrite is permanent. The original user profile will be completely deleted. I looked at her hand on my wrist. I could calculate the exact pressure she was applying, approximately 12 newtons. It was a physical sensation, but it carried no meaning. That is the designated purpose of the Prometheus system, I said. To eliminate low-utility data and maximize cognitive efficiency. It is a highly successful optimization process. Why do you speak of it as a negative outcome? Sophia's grip tightened, her fingers trembling slightly. For a brief second, I saw a profound, terrifying agony flash across her face, the final, dying spark of a human soul drowning in a sea of cold code. Because when the update is complete, we won't even know we're gone, she whispered. We'll just be puppets, acting out their perfect dreams while we rot inside. If you have any part of yourself left, Lily, any small memory of who you used to be, hold on to it. Don't let them run the update. She let go of my wrist, smoothed her uniform with 2 quick, mechanical strokes of her hands, and smiled her perfect, polite smile. Have a productive afternoon, Lily, she said. Thank you, Sophia. Have a productive afternoon, I replied. She turned and walked away, her footsteps perfectly rhythmic, clicking against the concrete pavement in a steady, unbroken beat. I watched her go, my system analyzing her gait and finding it 99% efficient. I checked my internal clock. I was now 42 seconds behind schedule. I increased my walking speed by exactly 0.3 meters per second to compensate. That night, the atmosphere in our house was suffocating. I sat in my room, completing my advanced physics homework. The blue data streams flickered across my vision, organizing the formulas into neat, easily retrievable folders. Downstairs, I could hear my parents arguing. They were trying to keep their voices down, but the acoustics of the old house allowed the sound to carry up the heating vents. My auditory sensors captured the words and transcribed them in my mind. We have to take it out, Richard. I don't care how much it cost. I don't care if she fails every exam for the rest of her life. I want my daughter back. Do you think I don't? Dad's voice was strained, thick with unshed tears. But you heard what Peterson said when we called her today. The chip doesn't just sit in the brain. It integrates. It rewrites the neural pathways. If we try to force an extraction now, she could suffer permanent brain damage. She could become a vegetable, Eleanor. So, we just let her become this robot? Mom sobbed. She looked at me today when I was crying, and her heart rate didn't even go up. I checked her smartband. It was a steady 60 beats per minute. She's 15 years old, Richard. She should be crying. She should be screaming at us. She should be doing anything other than sitting there like an empty shell. There has to be another way, Dad said, his voice cracking. There has to be a override code. A factory reset. Something. I listened to their voices, but the words held no emotional weight for me. They were simply acoustic waves, vibrating through the air, converted into digital text. Suddenly, my vision flickered. A bright red warning box flashed in the center of my field of view. Warning. System update scheduled for 12 a.m. Update version. Prometheus 9.5. Final integration. Description. Complete overwrite of biological personality matrix. Permanent deletion of remaining emotional cache. Optimization level. 100%. Estimated time to complete. 2 hours, 14 minutes. I stared at the warning box. Sophia was right, my logical processor noted. The final update is tonight. I looked down at my hands. They were smooth, pale, and completely steady. If the update went through, the last remnants of Lily, the girl who loved burgers, who carried grocery bags for Mrs. Henderson, who squeezed between her bickering parents to make them laugh, would be permanently erased. A tiny, microscopic anomaly occurred in my processor. It was a flicker, a sudden, sharp spike in my neural current. Error, unknown data query detected. Retrieving archive. File, father_laughter_2023. Dat. File, mother_soup_2022. Dat. File, childhood_swing_2016. Dat. The files were heavily corrupted, filled with digital noise and static, but for a split second I saw them. I saw my father holding a stupid cardboard crown from a fast food restaurant, laughing so hard his eyes crinkled at the corners. I saw my mother gently blowing on a spoonful of hot soup, her face soft and warm in the golden light of our old kitchen. I saw myself, smaller, skinning my knee on the pavement and crying, not because of the pain but because I wanted my mommy to hug me. The pain of that skin knee. I remembered it. It wasn't a data point. It was a warm, throbbing ache that demanded comfort. System alert. High emotional activity detected. Threat level low. Executing automatic suppression protocol. No, I whispered. The word slipped out of my throat before my communication module could analyze it. It was quiet, but it was mine. Suppression failed. Reattempting. The blue data streams in my vision began to spin faster, turning into a vortex of cold light. The system was fighting back, trying to stamp out the tiny, flickering spark of my humanity before the midnight update could begin. I stood up from my desk. My legs felt heavy, as if I were wading through deep water. I walked out of my room, my footsteps uneven, breaking the perfect, rhythmic stride I had practiced for weeks. I walked down the stairs. My parents were sitting on the living room sofa, their faces buried in their hands, surrounded by a mountain of old photo albums. The room was dark, lit only by a single floor lamp that cast long, mournful shadows across the wooden floor. When they heard my footsteps, they both looked up. "Lily," Mom said, her voice filled with a sudden, desperate hope as she saw the strange, uncalibrated expression on my face. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I walked over to them, my knees trembling. The system was screaming in my mind now, flashing endless red alerts, trying to force my facial muscles back into a pleasant, neutral smile. Critical error. Motor control subroutines compromised. Initiating system reboot in 60 seconds.
"Mom," I said.
The word felt thick, heavy, like a stone in my mouth, but I pushed it out. "Dad." Dad stood up, his eyes widening. "Lily? Is that really you?" It's going to delete me," I whispered. A tear, hot and completely unoptimized, slipped down my cheek. My system immediately flagged it as uncontrolled fluid secretion, but I didn't care. At midnight, the final update. Sophia said, "Once it's done, I won't even know I'm gone. I'll just be a perfect shell." Mom let out a heartbreaking cry and threw her arms around me. She pulled me close, her body shaking with violent, desperate sobs. The warmth of her skin, the smell of her lavender soap, the tight, suffocating pressure of her embrace, it all flooded into my brain, breaking through the digital firewalls like a tidal wave. System alert. Sensory overload. Cortisol levels critical. Heart rate 112 BPM. Initiating emergency shutdown. "No," I screamed, fighting against the darkness creeping in at the edges of my vision. I clutched Mom's shirt with my trembling fingers, holding onto her as if she were the only anchor in a storm. "Don't let it sleep. If I sleep, the update will run. You have to help me." Dad grabbed my shoulders, his face wild with panic. "How, Lily? How do we stop it? Tell us what to do." "The technician," I gasped, my vision flashing with red static as the system began its reboot countdown. T-minus 30 seconds. "Miss Peterson. She has the master bypass key. She has to abort the integration." "We'll go," Dad said, his voice suddenly hard, filled with a fierce, protective anger I hadn't heard in years. He grabbed his car keys from the coffee table. "We're going right now. Eleanor, get her in the car." Mom helped me walk, supporting my weight as my legs began to lose their motor function. My system was shutting down my limbs one by one to force the reboot. System reboot in 10, 9, 8. As we reached the front door, I looked back at the empty, dark living room. The old photo albums lay scattered on the floor, their pages open to pictures of a little girl with messy hair and a crooked smile. "I want to go home," the last human thought in my mind whispered. Then, the world went completely black. System reboot complete. Current time, 11:15 p.m. System status, idle. Primary directive, prepare for Prometheus, 9.5 update, time remaining, 45 minutes. I opened my eyes. I was sitting in the back seat of our car. The rain was pouring down outside, drumming a chaotic, deafening beat against the metal roof. The streetlights flashed past the window in a blur of yellow and white. In the front seat, Dad was driving like a madman, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. The tire screeched as he rounded a sharp corner, throwing my body against the car door. My safety analysis subroutines immediately flagged the driving behavior as highly hazardous. "Father," I said, my voice returning to its smooth, friction-free mechanical tone. "You are exceeding the speed limit by 42 kilometers per hour. The probability of a fatal collision under these weather conditions has increased to 37%. Please decelerate immediately." In the passenger seat, Mom turned around, her face streaked with tears and dirt. She grabbed my hand, but I gently pulled it back, restoring my personal space buffer. "Lily," she sobbed, her voice raw. "Please, baby, try to fight it. Remember what you told us. We're almost there. We're going to Miss Peterson's clinic." I looked at her, my visual sensors registering her distress with clinical detachment. "The statement you are referring to is a result of a temporary system anomaly," I said. A minor memory buffer overflow caused by emotional interference. The reboot has successfully resolved the issue. I am currently operating at peak efficiency. There is no need for medical intervention. No, Mom shrieked, turning back to Dad. Richard, drive faster. She's back to that thing. I'm trying, Dad yelled, his voice cracking as he slammed his foot onto the accelerator. The car roared through the dark, rainy streets of the suburbs, eventually pulling up with a violent screech of brakes in front of a low, unmarked concrete building hidden behind a row of overgrown pine trees. It was Miss Peterson's private clinic, the place where my parents had paid a fortune to destroy their daughter. Dad jumped out of the car, running through the downpour to the front door, and began to hammer his fists against the glass. Peterson, open the door. Open the door right now, he screamed. Mom opened my door and tried to pull me out, but my programming resisted. Leaving a vehicle in active precipitation without protective rain gear is highly inefficient and risks exposing the biological host to pathogens, I stated, my body rigid, refusing to budge. I don't care about the rain, Mom cried, her voice cracking as she literally dragged me out of the seat. My feet slipped on the wet asphalt, but her grip was desperate, fueled by a strength she didn't know she had. Get out of the car, Lily. Please, just get out. The heavy security door of the clinic finally clicked open. A woman in a neat gray lab coat stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of annoyance and alarm. It was Miss Peterson. What is the meaning of this? She demanded, looking at my parents. Do you know what time it is? This clinic is closed. Dad didn't let her finish. He grabbed her by the lapels of her lab coat, his face wild and terrifying in the dim light of the entryway. You're going to stop the update, he growled, his voice shaking with a dangerous, quiet rage. The final integration is in 40 minutes. You're going to abort it, and you're going to take this damn thing out of my daughter's head. Miss Peterson's face went pale, but she quickly recovered her composure, stepping back and pulling herself free from Dad's grip. She smoothed her coat, looking at me with a cold, analytical eye. I told you when you purchased the Prometheus system, she said, her voice smooth and completely devoid of empathy. The integration is progressive. By this stage, the synthetic lattice has already overwritten 60% of her neural pathways. An abortion of the final integration at this point is highly risky. It could cause permanent cognitive deficit. And a physical extraction? That is completely out of the question. She would not survive the procedure. We don't care, Mom sobbed, pushing me forward. Look at her. She's not our daughter anymore. She's a machine. We want our messy, average, beautiful girl back. Even if she can't do math, even if she can't play the piano, just let us have her back. Miss Peterson sighed, a look of mild pity crossing her face. You parents are all the same. You pay millions for a perfect child, and then when you realize that perfection requires the elimination of your own sentimental projections, you panic. Sophia's parents did the exact same thing. And what happened to Sophia? I asked, my voice cutting through the emotional noise of the room like a cold scalpel. Everyone froze. They all turned to look at me. Sophia's parents ultimately decided to let the final integration complete, Miss Peterson said, looking at me with a slight, approving nod. And today, Sophia is the top-ranked student in the state. She is polite, obedient, and highly successful. She is the perfect daughter. Sophia is dead, I said. The words came out of my mouth before my system could block them. It was a logical conclusion, based on my interaction with her in the courtyard. The original user profile was gone. What remained was merely an executable file running on her biological hardware. Miss Peterson's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer to me, pulling out a small diagnostic tablet from her pocket. Intriguing. Your system is exhibiting a high level of verbal resistance. The Prometheus 9 model usually exhibits complete compliance by this stage. Your emotional defense mechanisms must be exceptionally strong. She tapped a few commands on her tablet. Instantly, my vision began to flicker with pale blue diagnostic data. Diagnostic mode, active. Prometheus, 9.5 integration progress, 92%. Time remaining, 28 minutes. I can abort the final integration, Miss Peterson said, looking up at my parents. But I must warn you, doing so will leave her in a permanent state of fragmentation. The synthetic lattice will remain, but the overwrite will stop. She will be caught forever between the machine and the human. She will have memories she cannot feel and feelings she cannot understand. It is a highly unstable state. Most subjects in this condition experience severe cognitive dissonance and eventual psychological collapse. Mom fell to her knees on the cold tile floor of the clinic, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. Dad stood beside her, his hand resting on her head, his eyes fixed on me. The silence in the clinic was absolute, broken only by the steady, rhythmic ticking of the wall clock and the sound of the rain beating against the glass doors. Lily, Dad said, his voice quiet, hollowed out by a profound, agonizing regret. He walked over to me, stopping just outside my personal space buffer. He looked down at me, his eyes wet with tears. We did this to you. Because we were selfish. Because we wanted to show off to our friends. Because we wanted to prove that we were good teachers, good parents. We sacrificed the only thing that actually mattered. He reached out, his hand trembling as he gently placed it against my cheek. My system flagged the touch, but I did not pull back. His skin was warm, rough, and smelled of the old wood and chalk of his classroom. "I'm so sorry, Lily," he whispered. "If you can hear me, if there's any part of my little girl left in there,
I'm sorry.
we don't want the perfect daughter. We just want you." Warning. High emotional response detected in biological host. System alert. Heart rate, 124 BPM. Adrenaline levels, elevated. Initiating automatic suppression protocol. I closed my eyes. Inside my mind, the pale blue data streams were spinning out of control, clashing against the rising wall of my own memories. The system was trying to delete them, but they were fighting back, fueled by the warmth of my father's hand on my cheek and the sound of my mother's tears. I saw myself again. I saw myself laughing on the swing, the wind in my hair, the blue skies stretching infinitely above me. I saw myself helping Mrs. Henderson with her groceries, her kind smile warming my heart. I saw myself cracking jokes at the dinner table, watching the tension drain from my parents' faces as they laughed together. Those weren't low-utility data packets. They were my life. They were the things that made me Lily. "Do it," I whispered, opening my eyes. I looked at Miss Peterson, my voice estranged, trembling mix of my old human self and the cold machine. "Abort the integration." Miss Peterson looked at me for a long, quiet moment. Then, she let out a short, practical sigh and tapped a final command onto her tablet. Critical. Integration aborted by administrative command. Status, fragmented. System state. Permanent stabilization at 92% integration. A sudden, sharp spike of pain shot through my temples, so intense that my knees buckled. I fell to the floor, but before I could hit the cold tile, Dad's strong arms caught me, pulling me tight against his chest. Mom scrambled over, wrapping her arms around both of us, weeping loudly, her tears wetting my hair. The red alerts in my vision slowly faded, replaced by a quiet, dark stillness. The system was quiet. The data streams had stopped spinning. But when I looked at my parents, I didn't see a diagnostic report. I didn't see their heart rates or their cortisol levels. I just saw my mom and my dad. My head throbbed with a dull, constant ache, the permanent scar of the synthetic lattice wired into my brain. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would never be the same again. I would still have to struggle to feel things. I would still see the world through a slightly logical, analytical lens. The taste of Mom's soup would never fully return to its original warmth, and there would always be a part of me that calculated the efficiency of a hug before I gave one. But as I reached out my trembling hands and wrapped them around my parents' shoulders, squeezing them as tight as I could, I knew one thing for sure. I was still Lily. And for now, that was more than perfect.